Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast. Gosh, only 12 days to go, too. I think it is, if we're counting right, for the Purdue's first football game. 11 days to go for our sponsor, for Tom Dienhart and myself, to be at Facebook Live Wednesday night, August 31st at the Union Club Boiler Up Bar. We'll be looking forward to shedding, I don't know how much more wisdom Tom can impart on Purdue Penn State by that time, but we're going to do our best and have some fun with that as well. So we'll look forward to that appearance. We appreciate the Union Club as a sponsor. Make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube if you haven't already. You can even send a nice comment about Brian or Tom or whatever, or even me. We appreciate that as well if you take the time to do that. All right, we'll start, Tom, with you. A little bit of no media access this week. You're obviously having a chance to talk to coaches and players after practice, which kind of makes it quieter, I guess, at least in my world. But as you go into this last scrimmage, et cetera, what are some of the questions that you start to look at here in this last period of time heading into? I know you've talked about the secondary and some questions there, but what else is top of mind awareness for you as we start to get closer to that Penn State game?
Yeah, I guess you want to keep everybody healthy, right? That was a big storyline. The first week of camp, losing Garrett Miller and DeMarzio Lewis to season-ending injuries. So nothing appeared to have happened last week, so the team remains healthy. And you talked about, the cornerback spot. That's one they're trying to slowly get back. Corey Trice and Jamari Brown. Looks like they're making progress. Trice with his knee and Brown with his hip. I expect them to be ready for the opener. And sounds like they're getting more work in practice and team situations. And wide receiver, too, with Brock Thompson in particular being a guy who hasn't seen a lot of action as he continues to come back from having titanium rods inserted in each shin. So he's a guy, everybody seems to say all the right stuff about. He's going to be ready. He didn't participate in the spring scrimmage last Saturday. Not sure about his activity this week, but that's a guy I think Purdue needs. That's a guy I think with a chance maybe to be the number one wide receiver.
When you distill it all down, Brian, and obviously reading and looking at Tom's coverage, et cetera, that what questions do you sit there looking at that from your perspective heading into that last stretch run before opening night on Thursday, September 1st?
Yeah, I think I think I've said this before a couple Purdue seasons, but I think they've got to, be able to generate big plays offensively. And, I think that's where Garrett Miller hurts you a little bit, because I think that two tight end set playing off of Payne Durham with one of your best athletes on your team being Garrett Miller, I think that's a big deal. The wide receivers, not having that David Bell, not having that Rondell Moore that we know of at this point. I mean, for all we know, somebody might fall out of the sky here and become, like what Anthony Mahangu became on the fly a couple of years ago when he just overnight kind of turned into Calvin Johnson. I think that's kind of my big question. Again, I'm not at practice, so I don't know. Perhaps somebody out there is doing that as we speak, but I think, it's when your best player and your best chance is your quarterback throwing the ball up the field a lot, you want to make sure you're maximizing his value by having, that player who can go get you 30 yards, every now and then. And especially when, this is an offense that's built to make big plays. I think Purdue historically has probably worked on downfield passing probably more than any program in America. I don't know if they're going to be able to, sustain drives as well as they're going to be able to score when they're able to make those big chunk plays. So that's kind of my big question. That has been all of camp, all of off season, whatever it may be, who are kind of those big play guys.
Tom, you'll be looking a lot closer to Penn State as we get closer to game day. I think you had an interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it, a battle of two sixth-year quarterbacks. But is it, you written a lot about the secondary, and again, because Brown and Trice haven't practiced, I don't know if that's a big deal or practice as much, but is it as simple as Purdue, if anything is simple about that season opener, slowing down Penn State's passing game and not giving up big plays defensively? Is that one of the key things you're looking for? But are there other storylines as you look at this game 12 days out?
Yeah, I think that'll be a key one. Penn State's strength on defense is its secondary. Very good secondary. So that's going to be a fun matchup, watching that secondary match up with Purdue's receiving core, which we all know is really, as Brian said, is in search of some playmakers, some big playmakers, if you will. Purdue's going to do what Purdue does. As Brian said, they're going to throw the ball downfield, even if that is a strength of the Penn State defense. It's going to be fascinating to see, again, how this thing evolves for Purdue at the receiver spot. There is no shortage of I think, intriguing guys with that potential. We talk about Brock Thompson, TJ Sheffield, and Tyrone Tracy, I think, will be your slot guys. I think Charlie Jones will be another guy on the outside. That's a pretty good foursome right there. I think probably at the top of the pecking order. Abdur-Rahman Yassin and Mershawn Rice, I think, lurk right there as well. And a couple camp stars, the Auburn transfer Elijah Canyon and Colin Sullivan. And the two redshirt freshmen, Deion Burks is a guy whose name seems to come up a lot. Number 4, watch him. To a lesser extent, Preston Terrell. So that's a pretty good raft of wideouts for the staff to try to coach up and evolve here, going against, like I said, what's going to be a strong Penn State secondary. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Penn State offense, guys, has really struggled to run. They've really had issues on their offensive line for almost the entire James Franklin tenure. They really struggled last year to run the ball. That's going to be a point of emphasis for this offense, I think. I think we can all anticipate Purdue probably stacking the box, and I know Sean Clifford's a veteran, but still, man, don't let Penn State get any confidence, any momentum running the football. Try to continue to make their life miserable in that aspect and get after Clifford, maybe get some turnovers. So it'll be a fun chess match right out of the box, matching two pretty good coaches in James Franklin and Jeff Brom.
Yeah, it's a lot written, or some things written, at least early on, about Penn State's got some newcomers at running back that they're hoping to really get that running game going, because it has not been good. The interesting thing, Brian, and we always, starts of seasons, James Franklin always have some intrigue about where coaching and programs are going. Penn State, obviously a very proud program. It's been successful under James Franklin, but not in the last 2 years. 7-6 last year. Purdue will be motivated in front of a home crowd. Penn State's got a little bit of the back against the wall feeling to it. I don't know if that's fair, because COVID and everything else has changed things up. But James Franklin has a lot to prove, I would think, heading into Ross-Ade Stadium.
Yeah, but the way things go with James Franklin, he can go 2-0, and his name will be thrown out there for every high-end job that ends up opening up, and he'll get another $5 million in renegotiation per year or something like that, now that the Big Ten's TV money's come through. It's just like what Tom just said, they struggle to run the ball. There's no reason Penn State should ever struggle to run the ball. You have access to the best running back recruits out there. You have access to the best offensive line recruits out there. There's no reason Penn State should ever struggle to run the football. It's kind of one of those programs that, should consistently go something much better than 7-6. And so I'm not really sure what the deal is there. But they've got to get this thing righted to a certain extent, because 7-6 is not what Penn State ever has in mind. I think, it's got to start now, because I think that 7-6 at Penn State's not good enough. And if they keep going, something close to that 7-8 win range, people start to grumble a little bit. No matter how Teflon James Franklin tends to be, I think that they've got to get turned around, and I think it's got to start now. I mean, I think if you come to Purdue and you lose that opener, you set a bad tone for your season. It's not what they need. So I think this is a really big game for them, just like it's kind of a really big game for Purdue. I think for both teams, this is the sort of game that can, sort of springboard you to programs that, maybe aren't in the exact same position, but they're in a similar position in terms of needing this win.
Yeah.
Tom, Penn State is 11-11 in the last 2 years aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
James Franklin, for some reason, got a big contract extension in November from outgoing AD Sandy Barber. So there's a new boss for Franklin now. But again, he had the new deal. I'm told, though, that the buyout for that new deal is not that big. There was a lot of talk that he wanted the USC job last year, didn't get it. Of course, Lincoln Riley got it. And to really get ahead of myself, I mean, the guy it sounds like Penn State would love to get, if you talk to media there, is Matt Rule, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, who's a Penn State guy. And, of course, Matt Rule's kind of been on the hot seat in Carolina. So that's just something long-term for everybody to keep on their radar. I think James Franklin may have sort of ran his course at State College. I don't think anybody on either side would shed a tear if they made a change. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds for them. They got a big game on Auburn this year too, guys, in non-conference.
Well, you look at how their season started out last year. They start out 5-0, and after the disappointing COVID year, things looked great. But then they lose that game at Iowa, was it? And of course, that set Purdue up well because Purdue was able to beat the number 2 Hawkeyes after that. But yeah, I would agree. I think it is interesting that Penn State has a tradition, and both of you have said well that this program should win and should win big, based on the access that it has. But this game in Ross-Ade Stadium it's got so many storylines, and the least of which, Brian, we've seen this before, and we've all seen this before. 2018 to some extent, Purdue Northwestern, and of course Rondale Moore's breakout game. But that Thursday night game, that blackout game, and I know Purdue has come through at home, obviously, against Ohio State in 2018, and obviously last year's wins against Michigan State and et cetera. But this is a huge opportunity for a springboard for Purdue and what will be a raucous crowd, one would think. Yeah,
I mean, you set yourself up pretty good last year for success this year. I mean, what people I think have to remember is that this is largely the same Purdue team that beat Tennessee in the bowl game. This Purdue team should have every reason in the world to think that they can be very, very competitive this year. Because they don't have David Bell, they don't have George Karlaftis, they don't have Milton Wright, but they didn't have any of those guys to end last season either, and they still won a pretty epic game against Tennessee, against a really talented Tennessee team, even if perhaps they had a couple of guys sitting out too. The schedule sets up well. If you can get through Penn State, which even though they were only a 7-win team last year, Penn State's still Penn State. If you can get through that one, you have a chance to, do some really positive things this season. So this is kind of what, they talked about in 2018, where that Northwestern game could be a real springboard for them in what was a really, really big time environment for Purdue. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they didn't get that Northwestern win. They still went on to have a pretty solid, pretty memorable season. This one, I think, would be different because I think you're a little bit more of a known commodity as a team because you've got your quarterback back, but you also have a schedule where if you get this one, there are things look pretty favorable for you. Or better said, if you show you can win a game like this, you look at that schedule moving forward and you say, okay, if they can beat Penn State in a game Penn State had to have as much as Purdue had to have, if they can rise to the occasion in that sort of situation, if they can prove they're good enough to win that game, I don't know if I look at this schedule and see a game they can't win. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some really difficult games, but who's ranked on on Purdue's schedule right now.
I think just Wisconsin, maybe. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think
how many seasons have there been in the modern history of Purdue football where you've gotten into a season with that few ranked opponents? And I understand preseason rankings are what they are. They only tell you so much. No one has had a chance yet to earn or disearn. What would the word be there? Their preseason rankings. But nevertheless, that tells you kind of the transition period, sort of Purdue's schedules in here and what sort of opportunity that might present. On paper, you could say Purdue's just as good as anybody on their schedule. And that's largely because you have that quarterback back, you have a defense that made real strides last season, things like that. So if you're able to get this one, I think, things look pretty favorable for you to have at least a very, very solid season, if not a really, really good one.
Yeah. And Tom, to your point, 18th is Wisconsin's ranked preseason AP. That is the lone ranked opponent that the Boilermakers will be facing, at least in the preseason rankings. Tom, one thing we haven't talked about, and you've written about a little bit, but just your overall feelings. One of the things, game one is always can be an adventure or can be an extra premium on special teams. Obviously, Mitch Finneran's coming back. Purdue's got, we talked about Charlie Jones in the return game, but any other insights into Purdue's special teams, because obviously that will play an important role come Thursday night, that Thursday night game against the Nittany Lions.
I think it could be, at least from a kicking standpoint and a return standpoint, very good, right? I know there's questions about Jack Ansel, and he needs to, I guess, step up, if you will, after an inconsistent debut last year. He said all the right things this last week when we talked to him. And special teams coach Carl Maslowski seems like a great guy. He seems like he's very well respected among the players. Finneran, Ansel, then you factor in Charlie Jones, Big Ten return man of the year last year, guys. He's going to, of course, bring back punts and kickoffs. And Purdue also has Reese Taylor that can do it. He was an all Big Ten kickoff return man at Indiana a few years back. Deion Burke's name gets mentioned as a possibility. They've got some explosive players back there, but that's going to be Charlie Jones' show, guys. Purdue's most electric return man since Rondale Moore in 2018, a guy who can maybe win a game for you this year. Set you up with some short fields. Just generate a lot of excitement. Carl Maslowski said he's just fearless. He takes chances. He's a lot faster than you think, too. He's going to be a real fun guy to watch this year. I hope I'm not overhyping him, but he could be their some people have whispered to me he's their best receiver. And we know about his return skills. So he's going to be a real X factor that could be a difference maker for the team on a lot of different ways. So, I guess I'm encouraged by special teams, guys. And in a game like this opener, I know it's the first time you're going live, crazy things can happen, but I like Purdue's chances for success, maybe to avoid any big blunders in that area. And again, you guys watch a lot of football. Sometimes playing special teams can end up being the determining factor here. And to Brian's point about that schedule, boy, 4-0 in September would set you up great, because I think, to me, guys, October is going to be the make or break month there. It's not a real big revelation, but I believe 3 of the 4 games are on the road. You open at Minnesota. I think you go to Maryland. You come home and play Nebraska, and then you close the month at Wisconsin. Then you have a bye week. So, boy, you'd love to go into October. 4-0 would be great. 3-1, still, that would be the month that determines, I think, really how great this 2022 season is.
I was going to say, Brian was almost a teenager the last time Purdue had a punt return for a touchdown, if my memory is right.
No. Anthony Chambers did it.
Yeah, 2000, but that's 2003. I'm being a little.
How old do you think I am?
No, because I think Chambers was against Iowa in 2003. I think is the last one.
No, I've got it. That's not it.
Yeah, am I missing something? But the last time they had a punt return,
was the teenager.
Yeah, no. Well, Mostert had kick returns that they had, but they didn't have. I think their last punt return. Check me out. I may be wrong on that one, but it's been a while, and that is a factor that will be interesting to see with Charlie Jones, et cetera. Purdue will have a little
here it is right here. The last punt return for a TD was 2009. Aaron Valentine.
Oh, that's right.
Valentine. That's right. Who was that again?
The last kickoff for a touchdown was 2013. Akeem Hunt.
Okay, and when was who did Valentine do that against?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know.
I've just written that about 100 times this off season.
Yeah.
So I knew I could find it, but yeah, it'll be fun. You know, two guys. There's some fun coaching storylines here, right? Penn State is where Anthony Poindexter coaches, the former Boilermakers assistant. Of course, Taylor Stubblefield is on the staff and State College, PA as well. So that's going to be fun. Those guys, I guess, are coming home, if you will, at least for one night. And Penn State's got a new defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz, former Miami head coach, too, who I'm told is going to play a very aggressive brand of defense. So, again, sort of some undercurrent or underlying Penn State staff storylines that add a little bit more intrigue to this game.
All right, we just have a couple of minutes left, and it is a big topic. It could be its own show, but and we hit it a little bit last week because nothing really was all that surprising about the Big Ten media rights, even the dollar figure at $1 billion. But CBS, NBC, and Fox will be the stations of choice, the primary ones in 2023. Brian, just your overriding comments, and I'll go to Tom as well in terms of $1 billion, but
$7 billion.
What's $7 billion for 7 years. For 7 years, but 80 roughly. But it was interesting because they also quoted at 80 million per team. And I don't know if the math. I think it sounds like that $1 billion a year is kind of a minimum that they're going to get a guaranteed part. But anyway, what anything that surprised you in that deal? In terms of finally it coming down from Kevin Warren and company?
Not really. I mean, we knew it was going to be lucrative. It became pretty apparent it was going to be pretty multifaceted in terms of the number of platforms involved here. But it just goes to show you, sort of emerging technologies and, how coveted live sports is nowadays. I understand college football is a big deal, but college football is not a huge deal all over the country. And these were national platforms, bidding like crazy, for Big Ten football. Now, here in the Midwest, Ohio State and Michigan are an enormous deal and whatnot. But this touches everywhere. This puts the Big Ten in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. This puts the Big Ten in Sacramento, California. This puts the Big Ten in Hackensack, New Jersey. Shout out to Hackensack, New Jersey. All over the place, places that aren't Big Ten places. There's a really big deal from an exposure perspective for the Big Ten. It's a really big deal for the schools involved, given that best I can tell, Purdue's last media rights payout from the Big Ten was in the ballpark of $36 million. This is going to at least double that, I would have to think. What these schools are going to do with all this money, I have no idea. But I'm sure they'll figure it out. But it is a really big deal from a financial perspective. It's a really big deal from an exposure perspective. It's a better deal for football than I think it is for basketball. I think basketball, you're going to be asking a lot of people to go to some streaming platforms, to a certain extent. I think NBC and whatnot do a really nice job with some of their secondary sports that people don't necessarily recognize, hockey and soccer. What they were able to do with college basketball, I think, is going to be interesting. But ESPN, for basketball was so comfortable to a lot of people and just such a known commodity that I think that it's going to be an adjustment in basketball, but football drives this, and football money drives everything. And I think this is a really big deal for the Big Ten, and one the SEC is going to be hard pressed to match. I think the Big Ten got a big leg up in this Cold War going on right now with this media rights deal.
I just don't understand.
Last word, go ahead.
I just don't understand. Why don't the Big Ten and the SEC just say, look, let's just come together. That's just why are we doing this? Let's just come. What would it be worth if they're all together in one league and they all negotiated one big TV package together? I don't understand it. I mean, the NFL has already laid out a template for them. I don't know. We're probably going to get there. I just don't know why we're going through these machinations with some of this one-upsmanship, and we're all in this together, aren't we? I don't understand. It's like AFL, NFL, to use a real dated reference. I mean,
yeah.
Look what happened when they merged. Boy, look at the NFL today. Boy, I just don't understand it. And you know how I feel about the NIL stuff and just the crazy loops they're trying to pay guys. And again, I don't want to get off on that rant again, but
they're not trying to pay guys. They're succeeding to pay guys.
The NIL money, like I said, is for like Jalen Graham trying to make $500 selling T-shirts. That's NIL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's nobody walking on campus with $1 million, but guys getting $1 million. Anyway,
not a Purdue.
I know, but anyway, one other, I guess the one of the takeaways people had was the Big Ten has basically said they're still open for business from an expansion standpoint. I guess that's not a big shock, right? 7 years, I thought was a little, obviously, I guess, surprise, a 7-year deal. You always heard how people like to keep these things short so they go back to market quickly. I'm far from a TV expert, but I'm sure someone pointed out to me there's language in there to allow for, hey, if we do add teams, we can come back to the table and adjust this thing. So it sounds like, guys, if you're like me, you listen to other national people and read stories that, again, we're headed probably towards a 20 or 22 team Big Ten and SEC at some point here. When, I don't know. And of course, against that storyline, there's the backdrop of the sport breaking away from the NCAA governance. How's that going to look? How's that going to impact things? I mean, you get just talking about this and your mind gets going. You think about 100 things, don't you? And just a sport that I'm not going to call it chaos, but it's sort of chaotic with all that's going on right now. Trying to get your arms around the sport and where it's headed, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and what it's going to look like on many different levels. Again, I just wish we could fast forward and get there now and just get the players unionized, collectively bargain with them, come up with salary caps, everybody get together in one big league, set up divisions, and off and away we go, because who does it better than the NFL? I mean, I just don't understand this battle. It doesn't need to be a battle. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, or seems certain, and no matter what happens, it seems like it does give Purdue and some, because of the 7-year contract, some time, not time, but how this all will settle. You've at least got yourself in the situation. If the leagues change, if teams change out of leagues, one would think that the Big Ten is heading in a direction of keeping its members involved, and that's what's going to be. That's what's a.
You guys, did you guys follow John Wilner at all, who covers the Pac-12?
Yeah,
he had a scenario where the Big Ten was still going to try to get Texas.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. I would say anything's probably possible. Who knows? But you said Texas is still always more aligned with the Big Ten on a lot of levels as an institution too, and athletically. I don't know. It's interesting to see where this will all go. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's a soap opera that continues to play out before our very eyes.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to put this to this show. We just we came up with more questions than answers at the end of this, but that's kind of the nature of college sports these days. All right, we thank our sponsors, the Union Club Hotel. A reminder that Tom will talk all NIL and expansion on Facebook Live on Wednesday, August 31st, 7 p.m. at the Boiler Up Bar, and we'll look forward to doing that. And we want to thank the Union Club for its sponsorship of this. We're really looking forward to the start of the season. We want to also remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Leave us a comment. Only if it's positive, but we'd appreciate that too. So, guys, have a great rest of the weekend. We appreciate all of you for watching and listening to our fine show. We get a lot of positive comments on them. We appreciate that as well. So have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll look forward to next week. There'll be more of the same. It'll be just Tom and Brian together, but they'll be breaking this down and maybe arguing about what the future of college sports is. Have a great week, everybody.